Let's settle now into the spirit of meditation and prayer. Sit back and rest. Put your feet on the floor and feel the solid earth holding you securely in place. And rest in the rhythm of love. It's summer. Breathe deep and feel the sacredness of this time and this place. Breathe deep and feel the bond of this loving community. It is solstice. And for a few days, the sun will suspend in the sky motionless, as if reluctant to shift toward autumn. And in this still prayer of summer, the breezes will brush your skin with the fragrance of blossoms. The bird song and fireflies will nudge your soul. And warm rain will wash away the dust in your heart. Breathe deep all that is your life. Breathe deep all that is this earth. The sun fills every pore, fires our heart, calls us to play, and makes us lazy and gentle with ourselves and others. Do you hear the call of summer? The road is open, the sky is big, it's calling you. Step off the path. Feel the grass between your toes. Allow yourself to wander. Slow down. Stop. Touch this summer day. Let the sun guide you. So much is waiting to be discovered in the field, in the river, in your heart, in the eyes of your lover, in the hand of your child. Go, wander. Let the earth guide you to your true self. Let us be silent together. May the silence we share serve to hold us and heal us all. Amen. Well, hi, folks. It's nice to be back so soon. I love when schedules change and I say goodbye to a group of people and then I show up again. I thought you'd be okay with that. I want to start today by telling a story. It's called The Water Bearer's Garden. Now, a water bearer in India had two large pots, each hung on one end of a pole that he carried across his neck. One of the pots had a crack in it. And at the end of the long walk from the stream to his master's house, the cracked pot always arrived half full, while the other pot was perfect and always delivered the full portion of water. Now, for 2 years, this went on daily, and the bearer delivered only 1.5 pots of water to his master's house each day. Now, of course, the perfect pot was very proud of its accomplishments, perfect for the end for which it was made. But the cracked pot was ashamed of its own imperfection and miserable that it wasn't able to accomplish only half of its purpose. After 2 years of what it perceived to be a bitter failure, the cracked pot spoke to the water bearer one day by the stream and said, "I am ashamed of myself. I want to apologize to you." "Why?" asked the water bearer. "What are you ashamed of?" "I've not been able for these past 2 years to deliver only half my load, because this crack in my side causes water to leak out all the way back to the master's house. Now, because of my flaws, you don't have to do all this work. You don't get the full value of your efforts," the pot said. The water bearer felt sorry for the cracked pot, and in his compassion, he said, "As we return to the master's house, I want you to notice the beautiful flowers along the path." Indeed, as they went up the hill, the old cracked pot took notice of the sun warming the beautiful wildflowers on one side of the path, and this cheered it some. But at the end of the trail, it still felt sad because it had leaked out half of its load once again, and so the pot apologized to the bearer for its failure. The bearer said to the pot, "Didn't you notice the flowers were only on your side of the path, but not on the other pot's side? That's because I've always known about your flaw, and I just took advantage of it. I planted seeds on your side of the path, and every day while we walked back from the stream, you watered them. For 2 years, I've been able to pick beautiful flowers to decorate my master's table. Without you being just the way you are, he would not have had the beauty to grace his house." Here ends the story. I love this story. Maybe it's because I'm a gardener, or maybe it's because I'm an imperfect human being and an imperfect gardener. I love dirt. I love the feel of it. I love the smell of it. I love when it's dry and dusty. And I love when it's warm and moist in the summer rain. I even love it when it's cold and soggy and full of water in the early spring. I marvel at our very existence each time I put a shovel in the ground and I find earthworms making more dirt. I figure they've got an awesome responsibility and a great job. I even go through dirt withdrawal in February. Maybe some of you do too. When the smell of snow gets just a little bit old and I crave the fragrance of that spring dirt. I started gardening soon after my mother died. I was in my 30s and I was raising my kids and trying to find a way to live life after she died much sooner than I hoped she would. She hoped she would too. She was a gardener, you see. I remember when I was little, she had a rock garden on a scrappy patch of dirt in our backyard in Rochester. She spent hours there fussing over the placement of plants and her collection, I'm sorry to say, of plastic ducks and gnomes. She watered this garden with devotion. The soil was not the best. It was rocky and dry, and it was a small city plot against a rickety wire fence. But to my mom, it was pure heaven, and she created such beauty in this unexpected place. Flowers bloomed all summer, and birds came to drink from her plastic bird bath. It was her refuge when life became challenging, and my brother and I knew not to bother her while she was working. And while it never would have been on a garden tour, it was a place where her efforts produced healing results. My mom suffered from a long chronic illness, and as she grew older and lost her ability to garden outside, her house became filled with potted plants. Now, she had a bit of a racket going here because she made a habit of collecting any plant that seemed to need her loving care from any doctor's office she entered. She'd eye the sorry-looking plant that usually hadn't been watered in over a month, and she'd convince the office staff to let her take it home and nurse it back to health. She was in a wheelchair by then, and I can't tell you how many times I would wheel her back to the van with at least one potted plant in her lap. And she'd water them, and she'd nurse them. And with a little bit of TLC, they'd join the menagerie in her home. My dad used to joke that we'd have to cut a hole in the ceiling when the rubber tree had grown above 8 feet and had started like a stick, like that. As my mom's health faded, I watched her focus, her shift from the life she was struggling with to the life of her plants. She knew she wouldn't live long, but her plants would. And looking back now, I can see how her gardening gave her the strength to face her own limitations. When she died in December of 1990, her last words to me were, "Tina, water the plants." They really were. So I took it to heart. I started a garden at my own home in Victor soon after she died. Now, you would think that my mother's humble gardening efforts would be a lesson for me, but I must say, when I started out, I was not a humble gardener. I studied the books and I gathered the seed magazines and I planted with this amazing ambition. I had great plans for color schemes and patterns. I was convinced I could get my garden to bloom pink, white, and purple in the spring and then magically shift to red, yellow, and orange at the height of summer. Now, I can tell all of you experienced gardeners are laughing under your breath at my silly plans, because inevitably in this beautiful cloud of pink, an errant red flower would raise its beautiful head. Wild daisies invaded my carefully tended patterns, and I pulled up plants, I moved them around, I dug up daisies, I snipped errant blooms, and for several years I felt as if I was doing battle with my garden rather than cultivating it. And then, in the course of one night, in the middle of June, right about now, little green worms ate all of my prize columbines. They were there one night, and the next morning, totally gone, totally gone. That's when I realized that my garden was indeed cultivating me. I think perhaps nature conspires to make us better people. Humility in the face of nature was my first lesson. It took me a while to learn. That's when gardening ceased to be a battle or a chore and became my spiritual practice. Now, that's kind of a bumpy concept for us Unitarian Universalists, spiritual practice. Considering it, we can easily get caught up in taking apart the words and trying to define them and understand their meaning in our life. And yet, if we get caught there, I'm afraid we miss the opportunity to delve deeply into the corners of our souls. I think many of us back away from spiritual practice because we have questions that are difficult to answer and preconceived notions about what it is. I mean, what does it mean to be spiritual? And how do I know if I'm actually doing something that's a spiritual practice? And am I doing it right? And how do we understand or engage more traditional practices like prayer and meditation? Can these really be something that would be for us? You see, yet all faith traditions have spiritual practices that help them quiet the mind and heal the heart. And who doesn't need that? So perhaps we need to explore this a bit more, maybe seek its value and figure out how it might work for us. Because when we become depleted and exhausted by the complexities of our life, when we experience a deep hunger that we can't name, when our own well is dry, a spiritual practice can give us a chance to refill our reservoirs of courage and patience and generosity. And when our inner landscape is nourished, when our garden is lush, our capacity to love and serve others increases exponentially. And if we're lucky, through spiritual practice, we can experience not enlightenment or transcendence, that's for other religious traditions maybe, but for us, I think we can experience oneness, that core principle of Unitarian Universalism, that sense that we are all in this together. And our greatest gift is to each other. And the care of all of us becomes ultimately our reality and our deepest value. So, how do we step forward? How do we notice the opportunities for spiritual practice, the ones that might quiet us enough so that we can listen to our deepest self? So perhaps the easiest way to cultivate a spiritual practice is to pay attention to what's calling you. What do you yearn for? You see, I think a lot of times we think a spiritual practice means we need to meditate, and we need to do it a certain way, like the perfect pot. But we come with cracks. And so finding the practice that calls us and then shifting it into something that is spiritual is really what's needed. What do you yearn for? If you had a day where nothing was going on and nowhere to go, what would call you? Perhaps simple rest in the presence of nature, or reading your favorite poet, or merely sitting quietly, listening to your breath, or listening to Beethoven, perhaps, or Gregorian chants, or walking your dog, or paddling the lake, or riding a horse into the wind. While all these things may seem quite ordinary, what makes them a spiritual practice is our intention and our yearning to know our deepest self. When we set aside time for spiritual practice, we open our heart to the gifts of the world. And by expanding this definition of spiritual practice beyond the traditional methods, we can bypass all those theological struggles and questions and preconceived notions about what is right. We can create sacred space. We can indeed tend our inner garden. And here's the key, once again, it doesn't have to be perfect. I remember learning once how to meditate, and I was sitting for hours with a teacher, and I was hurting, my neck hurt, and I'm surely convinced that everyone in the room was doing it so much better than I. At which point he said out of the clear blue sky, "This is not a competition." Like he hadn't spoken for 3 hours, and all of a sudden he said that right to me. There's no need to do battle with our spiritual practice. There's really no clear goal. It's only a commitment to the journey, a commitment to show up each day, ready to accept what is given in the moments we choose to be with ourself and perhaps with our God. When I prepare to work in the garden, when I begin my spiritual practice, I have a ritual. I breathe deeply when I walk outside. I silently express gratitude for the gifts of the earth. I put on my gardening gloves slowly and with intention, and I move into a holy place. First, I walk about checking my plants and flowers, and I suspect on some level we even chat, my flowers and I. And then I tend to it. The weeding, the digging, the deadheading. I get dirty, I get sweaty, and above all, I'm alone. I'm alone and yet deeply connected to the earth and to everyone on it. I feel this connection through the dirt in my fingers. Thoughts gently move in and out of my mind. No thought ever stays very long. And I've learned now, after 25 years of gardening, not to force a garden, but to listen. To notice what grows easily, what needs careful tending, what needs more sunlight, what'll benefit from being moved to the front, and most of all, and I think a key part of a spiritual practice, what needs clearing out and thinning, what needs to be dug up by the roots and tossed away. These are such metaphors for our life, for our inner landscape. And while I don't apply these questions to myself directly, there's some internal voice that does. It's sort of in the background as I dig in the dirt. And the amazing aspect of spiritual practice is often that it's not the insight one gets in the moment, but the way Spirit or God or the universe works and creates a deep knowing that shows up later in your ordinary life. And right there next to the mundane, you begin to experience the divine. And that brings me back to the story of the water bearer. If we admit it, I think, we all recognize that we're not the perfect pot in the story. Well, maybe you're the perfect pot, but I'm more like the cracked pot. Sure, there are aspects of our life where we do extremely well, but when we allow our imperfection to be merely okay, gardens grow. And water is essential. Most of the plants my mom took home from the doctor's offices hadn't been watered, and we know how important water is to gardens, to life, to everything that is important on this earth. So, I have a gift for you today. These are bottles to hold your soul water. Now, I almost wrote holy water on them, but I thought that would be pushing it a little. So they say soul water. There's about 30 of them, so hopefully there's enough for everybody, but if you have to share with a partner, please do. In the fall, when we return to church from our summer adventures, we often celebrate the traditional UU water ceremony. We gather water from the places we've been in the summer months, and we bring it together to share with our fellow church members, and we pour our water into one stream. Now, most of the time, I don't know about you, but in the churches I've been in, it becomes a great way to know where people have been over the summer and turns a little bit into a travel log. But I'm asking you today to consider a different perspective for your water this summer. Since our spiritual garden needs water as much as our life does, our summer assignment is to find your soul water. Find it in the lake, in the creek near your home, in the hose in your backyard. Find it in the faucet in your shower on a hot, muggy day. Find it in faraway places, and when you return in September, and you pour the soul waters into one stream, tell us not where it comes from, but how it feeds your soul. Make this the summer you commit to your inner garden. Recognize the need and value to replenish your own well and know the depths of your own heart, because only when we pull up the toughest weeds and prune the thickest bush and water our own scrappy patch of earth is new growth possible. So as Bill so beautifully plays our thoughtful meditative music after the sermon, please come forward. Take a bottle for your soul water and a copy of the summer assignment, which is sort of just what I wrote for you. Okay, may it be so. Thank you so much. Amen. flame. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again. Amen.
That was wonderful.
Join us for worship every Sunday at 10 a.m. at the Unitarian Universalist Church of Canandaigua, a welcoming congregation. We are located at 3024 Cooley Road, 4 miles west of South Main Street, Canandaigua, just north of the intersection with Routes 5 and 20. Look for the blue signs just before the turn. Your comments about this program or questions about the church are welcome at 585-396-1370 or at our website, www.canandaiguauu.org. Producer and editor, Daniel Brigham.